What's going on? Welcome to the Real Estate Dojo podcast, acronymed RED, because we remove those red lines from your P&L by listening to what you got going on in your business right now and give you actionable advice in order to just get that needle driven just a bit further so that we can bring you back on the next 6 months or so and see what you have going on in your business and see if we can't give another update, another little bit of advice to kind of keep you moving forward. Today we have Zach Day and out of Ocala, formerly South Florida. And we're going to get into his story a little bit, but he just had a baby. So it looks like he's got a little bit of energy right now, but I'm sure he's having a lot of sleepless nights, which I can resonate with. So let's bring Zach on. What's going on, Zach, man? How you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Appreciate you taking the time to come on, especially after just having the newborn, and really just like just caring about your business, right? Just having that like extra little step, taking advantage of the fact that, hey, whether somebody whether they know what they're talking about or not is going to give me some advice, I'm willing to take it. And so that's always super amazing. Just being vulnerable, being on podcasts, talking about your business is a big thing. So let's start off by just give us an update in the last few weeks, man. Obviously, you've had a baby, like you've moved from South Florida, like kind of catch us up on you a little bit.
Yeah, so guess I'll start about a year ago. I met the girl of my dreams. And people, they see young love and it's like, oh, you guys are too early to get into things like that. So we were dating for a while, and all of a sudden, she became pregnant.
Surprise.
And instead of being afraid, we were both really excited, and we were just ready to tackle a very sudden future. So we kind of just put a plan together on what we need to do so that she can live a good life and not have to struggle. And I was working at, just like retail. Like I was working at Walmart for a little bit, doing like overnight stocking.
Okay.
And I determined like, okay, I'm gonna get into real estate because I had a buddy who kind of showed me wholesale and whatnot. And I kind of looked into that, but I dismissed it a little bit. And I was like, okay, well, let me try being an agent first. So I got my license.
Okay.
I finished my pre-licensing. I didn't get my license just then, but I did my pre-licensing. And then I got a job at a real estate brokerage where I work right now in Ocala. And I got the job first. And then I kind of just took a leap of faith, moving from South Florida to Ocala. I was living at my sister's house for about a month until I could figure out my own situation, which didn't take very long. She was worried, I'd be there when the baby was here.
No, Zach's coming up with his family. Looks like I'm gonna have visitors for 6 months.
No, she was worried that I was gonna have the baby in her house. You know what I mean?
Oh, there you go.
So,
yeah. That's true.
So, but no, I'm very much a go-getter, so that it didn't take us very long to actually get our own house, which my job actually helped out a lot because I do work at a real estate brokerage. I don't work as an agent myself, so I work as an inside sales agent, but I am licensed now. So
I'd like to dig into that in a second because I think a lot of people don't understand how brokerages work, and the fact that you just mentioned that I'd like to talk about that just a little bit. But let's continue the story.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and got the house. Love the job. The job is great. But obviously, I'm not looking to be employed for the rest of my life. I dug so much more into wholesale. I found it to be probably the best way to make money. Not wholesale, but real estate investing in general, which is wholesaling is a facet of real estate investing. I found that to be the best way to make money in real estate. I mean, you can be an agent, but the real money makers are the investors. So kind of completely dug into that and determined what I want to do with my company and the models and all that good stuff,
Cool. So you're 20.
Yeah.
Give context for everybody, because that's why if for anyone might not be watching on video and stuff, obviously, like well, I'm pretty young. I'm 29, but you're 20, and so when he was talking about earlier about just meeting each other, young love, like you guys met when you're 18 or 19 years old. I was the same way. I got married when I was 19. I got married when I was 18, and so like I had the same exact story. Everyone thought that we were going to get divorced, everything else. And now, 13 years later, 2 kids and, where we're at in life together as a family it's pretty
It's
funny.
awesome.
Naysayers, you know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
so don't believe in the naysayers.
I have very few of those now because I kind of, over the past year, I've kind of just did what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
Like, my parents thought I was crazy moving to Ocala, buying a house, working up, like doing all this stuff. But I mean, I just showed them that, I put the money where my mouth is and actually did.
Yeah,
Told them I was
that's a
going to
huge
do.
part of it, right? Like actually doing what you say is very seldom found. So good on you with that. So let's dig in a little bit. Bang, a blessing in disguise. Arises. You got a baby on the way. You guys are like, okay, we're just going to tackle this. We're going to figure out the best way to set ourselves up for success here. Let's get out of South Florida because it's really high, cost of living. You move up to Central Florida, in a beautiful area, Ocala, Florida, which is one of the most gorgeous areas. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know about Ocala, Ocala is like horse central of like
horse capital.
Like it is insane. The horse. I think maybe they're not above California probably, but they're definitely. It's a huge horse area. So there's just beautiful ranches there, and it's just a really amazing area that's growing like crazy compared to when I lived just south of Ocala, about 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. When I grew up, Ocala was like, yeah, we would go there to go to like Barnes and Noble or something like that. And then Brooksville got to Barnes and Noble, which is like 30 minutes south of me. So we just go there instead. And now like Gaines or Ocala is just blown up comparatively to where it was. And it's going to continue to do so with the Suncoast coming up north. So nevertheless, you moved up there. You got a job at a brokerage where you're operating as an inside sales rep right now. So can you tell me a little bit about what that job looks like for you day in, day out?
Yeah, so we have a website and we market that website and people will log into that website. It's basically like a Zillow or Redfin. You're just looking at listings in Ocala. And when people log into the website, we have a number in their email. Because that's the requirements to actually have an account on the website. And what we do is we just get in contact with those people. We call them multiple times a day. We have different pipelines for like if they just appeared inside of our system, we want to get to them as soon as possible. We also get a lot of inbound leads through obviously marketing, Zillow, stuff like that.
So basically, is your job like the pre-qualification on a assumed lead? So
Yes.
they're calling inbound, and then you're calling to see, okay, well, you were here. Obviously, you're on our website, so you're interested in probably buying a house or maybe selling, and you're that person that's going to figure that out because maybe they didn't go to step 2 to go the extra step. They just were that initial, or maybe they're calling in from Zillow on a specific like posting, like if someone calls in about a listing, is that going to go directly to an agent or is that going to go in through you first and then you're going to give it to an agent?
Yeah, just what you said. I mean, it's gonna so I guess it works like someone will see a house on Zillow and they'll inquire about it and they can like call Zillow or whatever, and what they're calling is actually us because we're a buyer. Obviously we represent both sides, but we help them on the buyer side of the transaction, and we give them more information about the listing and just being able to help them out. But yeah, we're basically we qualify the leads and we set up appointments for the OSAs, which is like a traditional real estate agent. And
now, do you have to be an agent to do the job that you're doing? Okay. So that's the big thing I wanted to show there is a lot of people think like, oh, you work in a brokerage, so you are an agent, and that's not necessarily true. And the reason why is because I've been pushing really strongly for all real estate investors to add agent to their strategy. And other people in the industry like Trevor at Carrot have been pushing this for a very long time, being dual agent investor, because it's really the way of the future. A lot of people think that wholesaling is going to take over being a real estate agent, and I believe it's the opposite. I believe that companies like EXP and virtual brokerages are going to take over wholesalers. I think that the legal side of the house is probably going to, from like the U.S. government, is going to restrict wholesaling to the point where most people have to be an agent, and then virtual brokerages are going to continue to blow up, and people are going to have their license in order to operate and deal with a homeowner. And maybe it will go the other direction, but it doesn't hurt going on the safer side and being prepared, one way or another.
Yeah.
So I love that you have your license, because you had mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to touch on this just because it's an important concept, that investors make the money, and that's not necessarily wrong, but it's also not the full truth and aspect of of where the money's at right now is in the agent space really heavily. And that was going to be something, as soon as I heard that you were getting your license or had your license, I was going to like, dude. And then you said you're on a brokerage. I'm like, dude, like you have the capability, especially with your story already, like your highest way for you right now to increase income is obviously getting listings, right? And starting to list properties and doing that. And I don't know how that works with your brokerage, obviously, like if you can start doing your own prospecting and start listing externally, or if you have to use the pipeline internally or what, but I love like how set up you are, like at 20 is fucking awesome, because thinking back to where I was when I didn't buy my first house until I was 23. It was about the same price range or whatever. I mean, I don't know if your house was the same price range as your sister's or whatever. My first house was 172,000 in North Dakota, and it was a brand new build. I started it in the construction phase and got to choose like some of the appliances and the cabinets and all that kind of stuff, and it was a really cool experience until North Dakota's oil fields started declining, and there was like 100-unit like buildings that were vacant. They were giving away like 3 months of rent and 60-inch TVs to try to get people to rent from them and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like eat my fists in this house. And anyway, I ended up being okay on it, but I didn't know anything about really real estate at the time, besides, I bought my own house. And so like you already having your license and everything else, especially being in Ocala, like there's a ton of opportunity for you. What I really love about what you said is just even so far is like when you found out you're having a kid and you guys were coming up here, you were really focused on just setting up so that, your girl and your daughter can, not struggle. And, just from where your head's at, is in a really, really good space. So let's push a little bit further and talk a little bit about just kind of what you submitted to me here on the submission to come on the podcast. And so we always have these questions, and I'll read them out here just so everyone's aware. What are you not succeeding in with currently? What struggles are you having in the business? And please be as direct as possible. And one of the things you submitted was, and this might be a little bit different now depending on when you submitted to come on, but getting an accurate MAO, which is maximum allowable offer, to get an accepted offer, setting up my business systems, raising capital for fix and flips, and being a beginner. What is your current business size, average numbers? Right now, you're just you haven't closed a deal yet. Is that still accurate?
Still accurate. Yep.
Okay, cool. And currently you're cold calling and calling agents. And then you're using REISift, Propstream, and Google Voice. So you have a really lean operation. And like we already said, you're 20 years old, and you're really looking to use wholesaling as a way to get some capital to start doing fix and flip and burst. Right?
Yep.
Is that all still accurate?
Solid. Yep.
All right, sweet. So I love what your thought process is. Wholesaling is truly an active income creator, but it's really similar. And I want you to kind of think about this pretty heavily, since because of the position you're in business right now. Right now, wholesaling is obviously a great way to end up getting like a $50,000 check without doing nothing. Like it's pretty freaking awesome in that respect, right? But you can also only get like a $10,000 check and do a lot of work. You can also only make like $2,000 and do a crap ton of work, way more than you won, but your word and your honor and everything makes you have to stick to it until the very end, and then you just get like basically nothing for your time. So there's good sides and bad sides to the wholesaling in general. What's really amazing about it is the ability for you to help a homeowner out, obviously have mitigated risk, and then pass it over to somebody who has maybe the means to handle that situation a little bit better than what you do. However, what's a lot easier right now, especially in your situation, is definitely getting listings. And if I were to look at your operation right now and I were to say, hey, or I was sitting in your shoes, well, I wouldn't be looking at trying to necessarily wholesale. I would be looking at first trying to list property, and then I would be looking to also say, hey, if I can't list your property, I have a guaranteed cash offer for you. A lot of this is going to depend because you're working for a brokerage, what's possible for you. You're going to have to figure that out a little bit because you are under a brokerage, not something like EXP, unless your brokerage is with EXP. But nevertheless, that's something you're going to have to look into with your broker. And so what I mean by that is, what I think would be the best way for you to do is continue doing outbound prospecting, right? But focus on trying to get a listing on properties that are 350,000 or more, which is pretty easy to do in Ocala. There's a lot of properties that are above that price range.
Yeah.
And because, and the reason why is because if you were to list that property, right, and you were to get a listing done and you were to sell that, right now for your momentum, it's going to give you the most bang for your buck because you're going to be able to list a property and you'll be able to make 8 to 10 grand, right, off of a listing. And then on top of that, all that inbound that you're getting from your listing now gives you buyers as well. So the benefit to listing properties as an investor and as an agent is the fact that it's the primary way that you're able to generate leads without having to pay any money, right? So think of it from this perspective. If you're a wholesaler, right, and you get a property for sale and you're like, cool, I'm going to list it on Facebook and I'm going to say, hey, I got this property for sale. If anybody else has a property that I can pay cash for, let me know. Like, you're not going to really get any comments on that posting saying, yeah, I know this guy that wants to sell their property for cash, and boom, there you go. If you do the opposite and you post a listing on Facebook, you're going to have a ton of people commenting saying that they're looking to buy a property, and your potential to have someone who wants to sell a property is much, much higher. And so from an organic perspective of you putting more income in your life right now, that's going to produce a lot more revenue faster, potentially, than wholesaling. As far as what it doesn't mean that you don't do wholesaling. It means that you put agent up here, wholesaling underneath of it, and you sell it as I buy, sell, list. Or I buy, sell, buy, sell, list. No, buy, sell. You're buying it, you're selling it. There's the third one. I just literally made a postcard for my agent team on there that I put this same exact 3 words: buy, sell, something else. It's not list. Is the third one? Is not the word. But nevertheless, and so what you're saying is like, hey, first and foremost, I'm Zach Day, your local, real estate agent, but I also buy. Yeah. You could do like Zach Day buys houses.com or some shit. I don't know. Zach Day Realtor, whatever. Right. And so anytime someone comes to you, you're presenting the options as, hey, listen, I would love to pay cash for your property. But it's going to, and if that's what makes sense for you, then fantastic. I think that's a great idea. Let's go that route. But I want you to understand that I can also, if that doesn't make sense, like you have a beautiful property, there's nothing wrong with it, it's perfectly listable and you have time to list it, let me just list it for you. Don't where a lot of, like, especially newer investors and even really seasoned investors get really terrible with this is they turn a blind eye to the thing that the seller really needs and wants because of what they want. And they basically kind of spit away money. Yeah. And so because one seems more easier or harder or whatever, and I just don't really like that. I just missed out on a listing myself from inbound that was on our Carrot website for a cash sale. And they came for a cash sale. Turned out that they weren't really interested in a cash sale. They want a market value. And I wasn't quick enough to get back to them. And they already have another agent. That's going to list for 400 grand. I literally just lost. It's 12 grand I just lost, on a simple, it would have sold like this. It's in Mary Esther. It's a small community in my little market here in Northwest Florida. And like that would have been like a 3-day listing, like it's so easy to do that. And what's really crazy about it is as you continue to grow, like, I don't know about the agents at your brokerage, but most of the agents locally here, they don't write up their listing contracts, right? Like their assistants write them up. They typically have somebody else that's working with them. Like they don't do that. They handle the offers and stuff, staying legally within NAR and everything else. But like a lot of people don't do the agent side simply because they think wholesaling is easier, and that's just not true. Like it's just not, And so let's talk about operations though, and the offer side, right? Because obviously, you are already an agent. You're in a brokerage. You understand the opportunity that's there. let's talk a little bit about the whole max allowable offer thing. So this kind of goes back to what I was just talking about when it comes to like how you approach the seller and what they want versus, you know, what you want. It's gonna be hard for you to approach sellers and work the perspective of like, yeah, I can buy your properties cash, right? For let's just say the property's value is $100,000, right? And it needs $10,000 in work. That means as is value is $90,000 if it needs $10,000 in work, right? So that means as is 90,000. You got to be able to buy the property cash and then sell it. Well, if you're going to list it for, let's say 90,000, let's say you didn't put any of that $10,000 of work into the deal. So you bought it, it's at 90, it's at 100,000 after repair value. It needs 10,000 in work. So it's 90,000, deduct 7% for listing, agent fees, and all that other kind of stuff. You know, that puts us at, let's see where it's at, 90,000 times 0.07. That's 6,300. So 90 minus, let's even round it to 7. That puts us at 83,000. So you could buy this for $83,000 and list it and break even. But nobody wants to break even, right? You want to wholesale this. And if a flipper is going to touch this, they're going to want to make on something so small cash wise, they're probably still going to want to make at least like 20 grand. You know, just because of the risk tolerance. It's not going to be like, oh, I'll only make 10 grand on a flip. Right. So they're probably going to want to make at least, you know, 20 grand. So you deduct your 20 grand from that. It's typically about 20% cash value. So $80,000 invested at 20%, about 20,000 in profit that they want to make. Right. So that's 63,000. Right, that you would, if you were to buy it for 63,000, then yeah, if you wanted to flip it, you had the 63 grand to buy it. You could list it right away and, you know, make 20 grand easy. And in fact, you can list it as your agent and you can even make more than that. You probably make closer to 25 grand. But you want to wholesale, so you know, deduct another 10,000 from that. Now we're at 53,000. Right. And so that's the typical, you know, what a lot of people would have done is they just would have went 100,000, 70%, or to deduct 30%. So they do a 70% max allowable offer. Then they deduct the expenses, and then they deduct a wholesale fee, and then they add like a 5% margin. By then you're down at like 15 grand or whatever they're going to make an offer on.
Yeah.
So I don't typically do it exactly like that. But what I do look at it is I look at it from the perspective of understanding where the numbers are coming from. So $90,000 is what it's worth right now. It'll be worth, you know, $100,000. And I like to deduct that cost of the rehab and then figure out if it's listable, because ideally I don't do any of the rehab, right? Ideally I could just buy it and then just list it. That's the ideal situation. And so I start there and then I just remove, you know, that 7% that I know, you know, if I'm an agent, which, you know, I'm probably going to do 5%, not 7%, because I know that I can list for less than 6% market between both agents. And so, you know, 7% though, and then that puts me at X value. And then from that value, I'm like, okay, well, that's my break even point. I always figure out what my break even point is. If that's my break even point, then how much money do I want to make? Well, I know I want to make 30 grand. Okay, well then subtract 30 grand. If the seller's at, you know, in this case, it came out to 53,000. If the seller's at 55,000, right? Well, then that just means that I'm only going to make $80,000 wholesale fee or a $28,000 flip.
Yeah.
Right. So it's one or the other. Like, how much am I willing to cut from my, you know, my number in order to get the listing or in order to get the deal? And so I don't really look at like the max allowable offer perspective is basically what I'm getting at. What I look at is I look at what is the deal and where can I fit in my piece of the pie? And I just have a really good understanding of what my buyers, if I am going to wholesale it, what my buyers are like willing to accept in returns. So I don't do the whole, and let me share my screen so we can have this on video for the calculator here. So what I don't do is I don't say, hey, the property is worth 100,000, so I'm just going to deduct 70% off. A lot of people don't understand why people do the 70% or the 30%. Why do you multiply it by 0.7 on a max allowable offer? Which your max allowable offer is typically purchase price, or ARV rather, minus 0.7, which is your 70%, minus rehab, minus wholesale fee.
Mm.
Right, that's typically where people are at, and then typically you subtract another like 5% for initial offer. So if I were to do that number here, 100,000 times 0.7, right, and this needed a $10,000 rehab, right, and then the wholesale fee of 10,000 minimum, we pretty much get really similar to that same number I had before, which was 53,000. Now we're at 50,000, right? And then another 5% off of that, so you multiply 5% off of that or whatever.
So that 5% is just to negotiate with, right? That's what
it's like your negotiation room, which you could literally just say, instead of really doing a 5%, I just like, cool, I'll just start at 45,000 instead of 50,000, and that's a really easy way to look at it. But I prefer to educate and let people understand why this 30%. Where's that 30% difference coming from? Why are we doing multiplication by 70.7 there? And that's because the 30% is a culmination of 7% listing, right, and 23% flippers profit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if I were to say $100,000 times 0.23, we end up at 23 grand.
Yeah.
So if I were to wholesale this for 50,000, by the time we add in now 50,000 plus the 10,000 in rehab, that puts us at 60,000. Add in the 23,000 in flippers profit, plus the the $10,000 wholesale fee, plus the $7,000 of listing fees and title fees, it gives us back to the 100,000 in purchase price, right? And so I just prefer to say, so that I'm understanding my full numbers, I just prefer to say, okay, it's $100,000, subtract my rehab of $10,000, that leaves 90. Now, what do I know if someone's going to invest, 90,000 in cash, which isn't the truth, by the way, and I'll show you why. If someone's going to invest $90,000 total in cash, though, I know, like, hey, they're probably going to want at least 20 grand back. Like, they're not going to take the risk unless it's a rental. Rental numbers might be a little bit different. But let's just subtract $20,000 just to kind of get to our base number here. That's 50,000 or 70,000, and then now subtract my wholesale fee, right, and my rehab, and you're back about basically at 50,000 again.
Yeah.
But here's the big thing: the flipper is not investing 90 grand. If the flipper is buying it from you for the $60,000, because you're under contract at 50,000 with the $10,000 wholesale fee, so they're buying it for 60, and then you add in their $10,000 in rehab, they're only buying it for 70 grand, not 90. So 20% of that is only 14 grand. So there's a buyer out there that wants a 20% return that's willing to probably only make, 14,000. In fact, I know a lot of buyers that are okay if they can turn and make a 10% profit, then they're fine with that. They'll invest 100,000 and they'll get 10% flat back, and they're okay with that. Because if you turn $100,000 10 times a year at 10%, you're making $100,000 a year, right?
Good.
So there's a lot of buyers that look at it from that perspective that are just sitting on cash, especially blue collar buyers in places like around Ocala with the mobile homes and things like that, right? Basically what I'm getting at is understand really the numbers of how you get to the bottom line, and you can piece together and build a deal, right?
Do you also look at carrying costs?
Yeah, and that was going to be my next point when it comes to these numbers. Where a lot of people mess up is they don't take into consideration on that $60,000 initial cost he's buying from you. There's about 2% in closing fees there from a cash sale perspective. So you got about $1,200 in closing fees there. So if you do that $1,200, but a lot of people like wholesalers, they don't add this in typically. The buyers know it, and this is where a lot of wholesalers lose their credibility. So it's about $1,200 there in that initial $60,000 in closing fees that the buyer is going to have to come to the table with, and then there's carrying costs. But this really depends on how they're coming to the table. If they're just a straight cash buyer and they're flipping this out of their own cash, then there is no carrying cost. There's just their standard ROI. So understanding what buyer you're using is big, and that's why people who have the cash in their own bank account are typically going to have buy it for a bit more than someone who doesn't. Because if let's just say the buyer is paying 10% APR on their money, they're going to have to reserve back like $5,000 in fees to make this deal happen, compared to the person who has $100K in their account to flip it. They don't have that, so they're going to pay you $5,000 potentially more than what the buyer that has to pay that $5,000 to the lender is going to pay you. But yeah, you got to account for that as well. But I do the same thing with that. I figure out an estimate. So I start from the 100,000. And for those that are listening on Spotify or whatever and can't keep all these numbers, you can always go back and look at the YouTube, playlist where I'm sharing my screen. But if I'm at 100,000 and I deduct that $10,000 in rehab, I'm going to guesstimate where the buyer, wants a cash return on, which is about 20,000 on that money. And like, the reason why that 0.7 is a really bad number also, by the way, is because like it doesn't scale. So if you have $1 million property, right, they're not going to make $300,000 in flip profit off $1 million property like every single time. Like that's the ideal situation, but it's not going to happen every time. They might be okay with making 150 grand on that. Yeah. So you really just got to understand where you're at from an asset class perspective, and that's why I prefer to break it down. Like, just understanding my buyers a little bit better, or understanding what I would pay. And all of my wholesale deals are evaluated based off what I would do. And a lot of people don't recommend that. A lot of people are like, oh, well, don't assume what a buyer is willing to pay. And the reason I don't go off that methodology is because if no buyer ends up wanting to pay it, then I'm still going to take care of the seller. I'm going to buy it to flip it myself. So I need to make sure that every offer that I make personally is always going to look good enough and be good enough for me to be able to close on the property. Because at the end of the day, it's my job to take care of the seller. It's my word that's on the line. And so I care about that more than I care about making money. So I'm going to make sure that, hey, this deal makes sense. If I'm going to invest 90 grand, I know that I'm at least going to want to make 20,000. So I'm going to subtract the 20,000. And then I'm going to subtract, everything else. I'm going to end up, let's say, at that 50,000 again. They're going to buy it from me for 60,000, like I said earlier. And then what I'm going to do is, I don't know what everybody's lenders are lending. I know an average of 8 to 10%, but for lower money, typically they're charging higher. So in this scenario, I'm going to do 12%. So I'm going to do 12%. Which is $7,200 on 60 grand divided by 12 months is $600 a month. Okay, so then what am I going to do? I know that's $600 a month in private money for $60,000 at 12%, 12% APR. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm going to look on the MLS and I'm going to try to find some recent listings. I'm going to figure out what average days on market is. Let's say that's 30 days. And then it's $10,000 rehab budget. So that's probably only going to take like maybe 3 weeks. It should take no longer than a month to rehab that. So I'm going to put it at like 90 days. I'm going to give it a little bit of buffer room and say it's going to take about 90 days. I'm going to take the $600 times 90, or times 3 rather. It gives me $1,800 a month in money, or $1,800 total in money, right? If he's using like a private money lender, or something like that. Now, like private money, because it's a lower, in this scenario, we're dealing with lower cost. Like a hard money, very few hard money lenders deal with anything under 75,000 purchase price and stuff. So, this is going to be actual private money. So outside of the cost of, the deal itself, they're going to have $1,800 in money plus $1,200 in initial closing costs, which is another $3,000 total, right? So now that we have an idea of those numbers, if we were to redo the whole equation of $100,000 is the after repair value, multiply that by about 7%, is a $7,000. So I'm going to type this out on the left-hand side. So 100,000 ARV minus 7,000 in listing and post flip closing. Okay, so that puts us at 93,000. Subtract our $20,000 for our flipper's profit, minus $20,000 flip profit. Okay, And then we're gonna, so now we're at 93,000 minus 20,000 puts us at 73,000. Okay, minus $10,000 rehab budget. Okay, and now we want to make at least $10,000 in our wholesale. So minus 10,000 wholesale. And then because we did our numbers properly and we set this up for the buyer really well, because what's going to happen if we don't do this is the buyer's going to come to the table and he's be like, well, I have closing costs on the front side and I have my private money costs, like you were saying. And so I can't buy it for that. And then you'd be like, well, no, here's my full breakdown, my numbers. Actually, you totally can, because I already did that equation at a 12% interest, at 10,000 rehab. So subtract the $3,000 there. And that puts us, at $50,000 initial asking or initial offer, or not initial offer. Technically, this would be your MAO, maximum allowable offer, at 10K. But really, technically, your max allowable offer could be 58,000 if you're willing to only make $2,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we might start a little bit lower than that. So maybe we start like 45,000. But I'm always going to gauge the seller first. I'm always going to figure out where they're at. So maybe initial 45,000 initial offer, and that's at basically 15K profit wholesale, right? And I actually have a calculator for like it breaking down all this stuff. If you just input the initial numbers in a community somewhere. So you have, so that's how I break down 100,000. Then you got the listing fees. Then you have the flipper's profit, whatever that may be, whatever you estimate. 23%, 30% cash on cash is typically cash invested is what they're typically looking to try to make. And so with that, if you assume 20,000 and they're okay with making 14,000, then you're just going to be able to sell it to them instead of 60,000. You might be able to sell it to them for 65, right? Yeah. So, you can be reasonable on that budget. Your wholesale fee, and then your I didn't put it here, but minus 3,000 for money and initial closing. And so that gives us around 50,000. So that's how I break down numbers as far as my max level offers and everything else when I'm running through them. I also look at it from the perspective of, depending on the asset class, like what the rental rates are and those kind of things. Because let's just say, for example, this property it only needs 10,000 in work, but it's totally rentable right now, and it would rent for $1,200 a month, right? Then my max allowable offer can be drastically different, because somebody's willing to spend at a 1%, return. They're willing to buy it for potentially $100,000 as it is, if it'll rent for $1,200, depending on the market. And so, I might make an offer upwards to $60,000 and sell it for $70,000, because they're going to get $30,000 in equity and they're going to rent it for $1,200 a month, right?
Yeah.
So you really just got to understand your buyers, and you really got to understand both sides of the market, the flip side, the rental side. And now if I'm presenting this to the seller, I'm like, okay, seller, I would really love to work with you. The first things first is obviously my cash offer, is going to be a lot lower, because, I got to make sure I make my returns on my money, and maybe it won't make sense, but I can definitely still list the property if you're looking to get the most out of it. And I try to just gauge, I personally try to let the seller know, like, they're going to be essentially kind of like disappointed on my cash offer. Right. And if they're still game after that, like, that shows motivation. I'm always seeking out the motivation side of it. So, so after that point, I'm going to offer them, like, well, here's my breakdown. I literally break down the numbers, like, hey, this will probably be worth about 100,000. I'll probably list it for about that. No use in me hiding it. You're going to see it when I list it. Right. And so, I'm probably going to list it for about 100,000. I'm going to put about $10,000 into it in my cash, plus my initial cash coming to the table to close with you. And so I'll have right around 60,000 or so invested. And I actually say it like that because then they're like, oh, wait, he just said you'll have about 60,000 invested. I wonder, and he said $10,000 for rehab. That means he's probably only going to offer me like 50. Right. And I just watch their face when I'm going to be making this offer, because they're running the numbers through their head. And so realistically, in order for me to be able to make, my returns on my cash, which is typically at least 20%, which is not which is pretty reasonable. I mean, the bank makes more than that off of the money you're storing with them. And so I would honestly be around $45,000 for a cash offer. Comparatively, if you have a little bit more time, we could probably list it and at least put an extra $20,000 in your pocket.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't work out, I can definitely pay cash for it. And obviously, in that scenario and those numbers, getting the wholesale or the flip, preferably the flip, is going to make you more money. Because you're going to make $30,000 on the flip. If you flip it yourself, $10,000 or $15,000 on a wholesale, versus if you were to list and sell that property, you'd only make like $3,000.
Yeah, and that's kind of the that's what I'm trying to get to is I'm creating these systems where I can have a team of acquisitions. They can get properties for me. I can have a flow of properties, that I can just invest in myself. And I can get it at an extreme discount because I've actually taken out the wholesale fee, and then I can just invest in those properties myself and flip them and hold them. So that's kind of the end game.
It's a great way to go about it, but it all starts with that initial pipeline, right? And then really what I would challenge you to do is just be like, cool, for every like X amount of listings, I pick up this deal, right? Because you're going to figure out that number. Like as you continue to market and you're reaching out to these individuals and you're casing them, you're going to figure out like, okay, right now in my market, tax delinquencies are typically selling to me cash. Pre-foreclosures are typically wanting to list their property. You're going to get a feel on that. And you're going to understand who to market to for what. And being that you're in the REISift community and everything, like of the Sensei flow, I'm sure that's what you're probably kind of doing right now. I'm guessing from a marketing perspective. I don't know. We didn't really talk about that yet, but what you want to do is you want to get an initial piece of data set. I would nuke Propstream right now, especially since you're an agent. You don't need that. And I would pull from the MLS. I'd be pulling failed listings out, and I'd be uploading those to REISift, and I'd have those to market to from the agent side or the cash offer. I'd come for a cash offer initially, and then I'd be like, oh, wait a second. I noticed that you actually had this listed previously. I can actually probably relist it to you. I can see that probably why it didn't sell was because this, and that, and the other, right? And be like, and so we can probably list it for you as well if if this doesn't work out. And so I would nuke Propstream and save the $99 a month. And in your market where you're located, like getting stuff from the county is pretty easy. I have the data myself, so I would pull the rest of the stuff from the county, and then I would just only have REISift and Google Voice for now until you can get AirCall, and then I would add AirCall in the equation there, and I would just be pulling county data using REISift and AirCall to do that outbound kind of niche prospecting. Outside of that, I'd build up that budget to just send direct mail, and I would have I would have a direct mail piece that is tailored around, again, buying. I'm an agent that buys. That doesn't work, we can sell it for you, and if that doesn't work, and then I can also handle buyers or listings.
Just giving them as many exit strategies as possible.
Yeah, and then just running them through that pipeline. And so right now you're super lean. I would continue doing that, and then just figure out the branding aspect of things. Have you thought about like how to brand yourself there yet?
Yeah, I came up with like a whole like a slide, like a Google slide of what I'm going to be doing with my company and whatnot. See if I can
do you have a company name yet?
Yeah.
In general? Okay.
Yeah, so it's going to be Cloudbound REI.
Cloudbound REI. Okay.
Yeah. I kind of broke down the whole, like, just like the wholesale, like the deal flow is what I call it. Which I have, the first part is like inside acquisitions, where the ISA, I use that term because obviously that's what I am now. They call and they qualify motivated sellers and set up an appointment to have an outside acquisitions present an offer to them. And then the outside acquisitions, they do their research to come up with the MAO. They figure out the ARV and the cost of repair, and then they will present the offer to the seller, and then hopefully obtain like a purchase and sale agreement. And then part 3 would be like disposition, where they would, like a dispo assistant would set up a lockbox, schedule showings for buyers, and create a property profile and market it to buyers.
Okay.
And then that would get passed on to the transaction coordinator, who would have both the purchase and sale agreement and the assignment contract. they can open escrow and get all
Perfect.
the technical started.
That's definitely the flow, right? Now now the big part is just really tightening up the front side of that to actually create the opportunity for that flow to initiate, right?
Yep.
And so, have you you're not in the are you in the data to dollars challenge at all? No. Okay. Well, we just covered something in that called the motivated seller focuser worksheet. I think that you should do that. I'll get it over. I'll get the actual worksheet over to you. I think it might already be redesigned, but I'll get that over to you. We cover it in the challenge, but what I think that is a really good place for you to start too, and figuring out who it is that you want to market to, like spend the marketing dollars on in Ocala.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely a lot of different pockets. There's like a really, really rich area of Ocala. There's the lower income part of Ocala, and then there's that, initial home buyer, portion of Ocala. Like there's a lot of different types of asset classes in Ocala. And so figuring out who is that you want to focus on and getting an idea off the MLS on where's the biggest turnover and opportunity. And that motivated seller focuser kind of like helps you figure that out.
Yeah.
And then from there, initiating the Sensei flow. If you have that worksheet, have you seen that before at all?
I've seen it. Yeah. So I mean, I haven't seen it in a while. I saw it like one time, but I mean, you're just calling. You're
just doing niche sequential. So it's like you got a record that has 5 phone numbers. I'm going to dial each phone number. I'm going to create a task to follow up with them. Stuff that you're already really good at, I'm sure, with your job, right?
Yeah.
Really similar, and you can edit and kind of format that flow as good as you want, or however you want, as far as how you do it. So that's just kind of like a good baseline process to follow. And I would just do that. And honestly, in Ocala area, the first thing I would be focused on is probates and tax delinquencies, because both of them are great listings and cash buys.
I was about to ask you. So my market I'm trying to focus on is actually Tampa. What are your thoughts on that? You think Tampa's
No, dude, I've been marketing in Tampa for like 3 years and only done like a few deals. It's really hard to like not be in there. I have boots on the ground down there and everything. And like your market, Ocala is a much better market than Tampa.
Think so?
Yeah, I really do believe so. That like you'll be competing so heavily and now what I know and what most people know is that like there's no such thing as competition, right? But there is such thing as a form of saturation in specific asset classes, and getting in front of sellers down there in Tampa is not super difficult. But everybody's hitting everybody, and in Ocala, like you have a lot of the right asset class price range, like Tampa, like $350,000-$450,000 houses, like their houses, like the market down there is just freaking just skyrocketing like crazy, and so is Ocala. But Ocala still has $150,000 houses, $50,000 houses, $60,000 houses. There's still that price range where people that aren't like mega buyers are still buying and flipping in, right? So what happens is when the market pushes up, a lot of like the players that were playing at that first time home buyer range before, they get pushed out because it becomes too risky for them. Because if something goes wrong, like they're not going to be able to handle it. So you only have big money buying in those areas like hedge funds and everything else. And then you'll start seeing once the market gets too crazy, the hedge fund buyers back out because it's too much risk for them. They move to a different market. And so what's really nice about Ocala right now is Ocala has a ton of new builds still going on. So you have a huge opportunity for land buys and wholesaling land to buyers. So you can literally find and network with builders, and you can push them land all day long in Ocala. And so that's a really good niche. So there's a lot of opportunity for niches there. In addition to that, you have mobile homes there, which is a fantastic. A lot of people are like, oh, mobile homes are like really crappy, like things to invest in.
They're pretty expensive now.
Wholesale, they are pretty expensive, but then that's why they're great for wholesaling and flipping, right? Because like I just did one just west of Ocala. I bought it for 65 grand, sold it for 180 grand. We put 20 grand in it. Like you can get into them because they're going up in price so much, because everything else is going up in price so much, but you can still buy them relatively cheap and they don't take too much to fix. And so you can make really high margins off of them. So if I was down there, especially boots on ground, I would be focusing on land, and I'd be focusing on mobile homes, tax delinquency, probate.
Gotcha.
Those combinations, especially things where you can find mobile homes that are kind of like the oddball because they were there and now houses are built around them, to where you can buy the mobile home land and then tear out the home and then build a new house on it.
Yeah.
So opportunities like that. So that's where I would personally focus on if I was down there. And in fact, I have campaigns running in Gainesville that are exact type of campaigns, and they work really well.
Oh, actually, I was initially going to get into Gainesville, but I don't know.
It's hard. It's hard there. Gainesville is a little bit harder than like that Ocala region, simply because of UF. Like when the prices started skyrocketing, Gainesville itself became super retarded. And so it's the outskirts of Gainesville, in the markets like can't think of the town just southwest of Gainesville. Anyway, it's these like little sub markets outside. It's the little smaller towns outside of Gainesville. Let me actually just tell you where they are. Let me see.
So places like Ocala, which are pretty rural, it could be pretty difficult to find a buyer for certain houses. How would you go about like finding a buyer for like a more rural
Dude,
property?
you're going to be selling to flippers right now. Won't care. Like if it's a good deal, they're not going to care. Because the cool thing about like Ocala and that whole region is like a lot of people that live in Gainesville, a lot of people that live in Ocala, like they don't like living in the city, so like they buy houses. The houses are still selling fast and rural. Like Archer, Florida, for example. That's where our last flip was down there. Archer, like it's basically Archer is nothing but a like east of Archer. There's communities of mobile homes, like miles of just mobile home communities, and like they're just selling like hotcakes in that area. That's southwest of Gainesville. So instead of marketing in Gainesville, marketing in Archer and hitting all the mobile homes and being the authority in Archer, Newberry, Williston is kind of so. It's not too much houses down in there. But then we go down to Ocala and we're looking at Ocala. I'm like, okay, well, where's the opportunity? Where are people moving outside of there? You know, you're talking, really south of that. You don't got anything until you hit, where I'm from in like Inverness area. So like you got to go north of that a bit, kind of pushing up towards Gainesville. But anything that's rural, like if it's in like Fellowship or like Anthony or any of those like smaller cities, Huntington, Silver Springs outside of, Gainesville, all that's going to be really good still. Really, really good markets. Bellevue is a fantastic area. I don't think you can go wrong with anything outside of anything that's spanning from Ocala to Gainesville. Obviously, if there's something that's a little bit more secluded, like, like, I don't know, what is this, like in between like Fellowship and Fleming or whatever, which is just nothing but land and farm, and yeah, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but there's still buyers there. Just narrow down your zip code. Just narrow down your marketing, basically.
Yeah. I watch a lot of videos from you guys, and I definitely have been doing it by zip code.
Yeah.
So I have a few questions here. So
Good.
When you're starting out in a market, I think what you mentioned is like you want to pull the high equity first, right? Like that's like the blanket data that you want to pull.
Yeah, ideally.
So is there any other like blanket data list that I should be pulling before I start pulling like niche lists?
Yeah, just get it based off the sales date. Just don't do any equity formatting or anything. Just get it based off the last sale date, like 5 years or more ago. Or right now you can do 3 years or more ago and you're going to still have equity in it because of the market, right? But 3 years or older, narrow down by, property class and things like that. Focus on a niche initially, get all that base data. And then because you're buying that base data with like mobile homes and single family residences that are built in 1985 or older or whatever, that motivated seller focuser helps you focus down on that and figure that out. Just look at what's selling. And then you get that tax delinquent list and that probate list. And if you upload it, to REISift now and those stack with each other, that probate and that tax limit fits that initial buy criteria really easily, and it has equity. And so now it fits all the red flags of like, cool, I'm going to send mail to this, call it, and try to get a hold of these individuals, right?
Yeah. And another question was like, what are like the best niche lists to pull because you already said tax liens and or tax delinquency and probate.
Tax
Is there any
delinquency,
other great ones that
man,
I can
there's a
pull?
ton. There's a ton. I mean, you got code enforcement, you got the water shutoff list.
Yep.
I mean, there's a ton of them. But honestly, I wouldn't even like focus too heavily on that right now until you start getting momentum on the other ones. Because the one thing that's for certain is that tax delinquency and probates have deals in them, right? And if it's tax delinquency and probate, most likely it's on the water shutoff, and a lot of these other ones can be assumed. You know, vacancy list, when you upload that stuff to REISift, you're going to get the vacancy side of it, and that's a really good, obviously, list to focus on. Less contact rate, but a good list to focus on.
And also, so how frequently should I be updating these lists? So high equity is like probably like once a year, maybe.
Yeah, once a year. And you're really just buying the stuff. When you do that, you're just buying the stuff that, you know, sold recently, you know. But if you just continue to update your sold data moving forward, you won't have to really worry about buying new equity data, because you're basically, when you update your sold data, you're resetting the equity date, right? Because now it's sold on this date, and so therefore it's going to continue. But I wouldn't really focus too much on updating it. Tax delinquency in Florida is going to be annually, because that's the only time that we check for tax delinquency in Florida. And then probate as often as you can get it.
So like monthly, would that be a good?
Monthly or even weekly. Like if you can go to your county, you can find it weekly, then pull it weekly. If you can get it from the county weekly, then do that. Like as often as possible, so you can be first to market. You want to be the first person to be reaching out to these individuals. A good place to get an initial data set of probate data is foreclosuredaily.com. They're a good place for like an initial, you know, bulk amount of like, okay, you know, ones that have been probate in the last year or whatever. But also go to your county and just look at what the what the deed shows when something goes in probate. Like in Okaloosa County, it goes from a warranty deed to a deed that's PB, Papa Bravo for probate. And so you can filter by PB deeds, and that happened in the last month. And then boom, you can see all the new probate deeds over the last month. Now,
so I can do that at the county appraiser website, or
through the county like public records site.
Oh, public. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is that, yeah, cool. I know that these people finally made the decision to file probate. It's in the process of probate. The other bad decision, the bad part of that though, of it being there, is that there could potentially already be authority there. So pre-probate's always nice, because you can come to them and be that authority, help them through the process and all that other stuff. Give them your attorney and all that other kind of stuff. But it also means that sometimes you get the people who don't want to file probate and all this other kind of stuff, and you get a lot of family issues. So at least the stuff that's already filed probate, you already know that like the PR, the representative has already been, you know, decided, and the family's working towards getting it resolved. But then you also have to deal with the fact that that attorney might want this done this way or whatever. So you just gotta kind of play it. But anyway, man, I do have the Data to Dollars challenge starting here in a little bit, but hopefully that was helpful to you in general. Hopefully you got some vision of where you want to go with it, man. Keep in contact with me, man. Shoot me a message on Facebook. I love to continue following, you know, your journey and what you got going on. If you need anything, reach out, and we'll get you back on here in like 6 months from now and see where you're at. Just remember, like, don't think too much out here right now at this moment. And you already know this from working in the brokerage. Like, you know that the next most, you know, important step is just to get the initial data set, if you don't already have it, and start calling like at least, you know, 50 records a day and start trying to create opportunity. Right.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, man. Keep me up to date. Love to follow your journey, man. Be safe, and tell the little one I said hi.
I will.
All right, bro.
All right, thank you.
Yep.